Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 39 of Syncing with ServiceNow. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I'm happy to be back. Missed a couple weeks. I think we missed a couple weeks. There might have been a holiday or two in there somewhere along the way. Appreciate you guys covering this while I was gone. Let me do the commercial real quick. Dadgummit, we're a ServiceNow partner because the world needs better and more ServiceNow partners. And if you're a ServiceNow user, if you're a ServiceNow, if your organization has ServiceNow, there's a chance that we can help you a ton because there's always room for improvement. And the way we come at it gives us the opportunity to be successful with you long term. Yes, we are a business, but we don't have to maximize profitability at your expense in order to be a business. And that's kind of how we see the world. I've got my experts on, Fred Reynolds, who runs the practice. Fred, how is it going in ServiceNow's XenTegra world?
It is going wonderful. Got a lot of customers we're starting to work with, a lot of customers that we've done work for that keep coming back and looking for more. So loving the fact that we're consulting a lot. I'd say part of this is obviously out there trying to make our brand known, but the customers we're working with are certainly realizing the type of work and the quality we do. So I'm loving to see the repeat questions and consulting questions that lead us to have that lifelong customer.
Client for life. I'm gonna ask you a question. Give me the honest answer. I don't know. I didn't stage it. Customer retention rate for your group is what?
100% so far.
Yeah.
Is it really 100%?
I haven't had any customer that said they didn't like us and wanted to leave us. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I got a text from a former employee last week that said, he left on good terms, good enough terms, but he was on a golf course somewhere and he heard somebody talking about XenTegra and how much the customer loved working with it. So he thought he'd give me a text and tell me. That was
Oh,
that was pretty nice. And honestly, I needed that on Friday after all this other stuff going on.
absolutely.
Uh, Eddie McDonald, how are you?
I'm good, buddy. I'm thinner, richer, and better looking than I was yesterday. So it's a good day.
Are any of those things actually true?
Yeah, every one of them is true.
All right. Well, Eddie's a liar. Mike, how are you?
I am doing well. My wife moved out of the office to another space in the house, so I spent the weekend doing a new mesh networking with my thousands of IoT devices, switching them over.
Now,
So
was that
feeling
her
productive.
choice or yours?
Hmm?
Was that her choice that she move out or yours?
I think she initiated it, but I think it was a good move,
I love that conversation. Mike told me that earlier today. So I spent his weekend, and I'm like, that's never been a problem for me because there's no way my wife would work in the same room as me because I talk all day. I'm loud. I get excited. I pace. I mean, I walk through
That
the house already. So
that was my wife's biggest complaint. You talk all day long, is what she said.
we're consultants.
Lee and I, my wife and I had next door offices and it wouldn't work. We had to go on the opposite ends of the house. We could still hear each other. So yeah, I get it.
Well, Andy goes to another states.
Yeah. My wife was supposed to ride with me tomorrow to Raleigh to go see our kids who are in school there. And she said, "Are you going to be on calls all the time on the way up there?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, I think I won't go." Well, guys, Mike, I cut you off to make fun of you, but glad to have you.
No, it's all good. Doing
And,
well.
and I'm curious about your mesh network and how you do it. And I'm even more curious around your IoT comment, but that'll have to be for a different time.
Yep.
So guys, you brought a blog here from August 29th of 2024. Funny, I read that date and I said, well, that's last year. I think that's in the future. Like, oh crap, it's already September. I literally had forgotten. And it's from Valerie O'Connell. So thank you, Valerie, for writing this. And the title is How to Reduce MTTR by Helping People Get Out of Their Own Way. I had to go look up what MTTR is. I know you guys knew, and it's mean time to resolution. That's paramount if you're working a customer call center, a help desk, you name it. I think that matters, whether it's me complaining about my new top on my Bronco being too windy, or somebody complaining they can't log in or the logins are slow. Mike, why did you pick this one?
I thought it was pretty apropos and also it was recent. We always look to have blogs that are recently published so that we can speak to topics that people may be interested in. MTTR, of course, refers to mean time to resolve or repair, but it also has some other definitions depending on how you want to use it. Mean time to respond. ServiceNow's two principal SLAs are regarding response and resolution. Response would be the first person to assign to it, and the resolution is the resolution of the issue. Sometimes those are both exposed to customers, sometimes only one and the other is just used internally. But very apropos and pertinent topics.
Fred, does this acronym apply to just the CSM portion, ITSM, but CSM portion of ServiceNow, or this kind of apply to all things
No,
service?
I think it applies to everything. I mean, you can put a spin on it, right? Because everything that has a case or an incident or anything can have a defined response. So it might kind of let on the SLAs, how you build those. So it's really how you define a service you're going to provide and then how you're going to respond to those. And this gets, look, Mike proposed this blog today, but we kind of got excited before this got started because to me, as we go through this, I want you to keep in mind that these conversations around mean time to response or and the definition around this, like this has been conversations I've been having for 20 plus years and probably 20 plus years before me. This is still a problem for any customer of any size today. I mean, it's interesting at this much time that people still don't have a lot of this stuff handled. People still need help with this. And that's the whole purpose of like a platform like ServiceNow to help with it. So I won't go too deep, but I just find it a very applicable. I'm happy that this is one of those blogs like I'm happy to talk to because I lived it for so long of trying to get better around this pace.
So this is the one Mike brought, he normally does, but Eddie, I'm gonna come to you first with the low tech side of MTTR. I think you would probably be the best person to explain how you explain that to people from a business level as well as just from a, I guess from a business level, how.
Well, I love it that you say the low tech one is good for me. So thanks for that.
Just because your present company is Mike and Fred, I'll tee this one up for you, but I think you're gonna knock it out.
Sure. Well, so let's take a step back. Let's talk about what is MTTR. So we have an issue and how long does it take to resolve that issue? So if we're talking about ServiceNow, at its core, it is a productivity engine. That's what it's there for, is to get people to work more efficiently, visibility, work in one place. And too often, if we take a person's hourly salary, and there's numbers here we'll talk about, if it takes a half an hour to MTTR an issue, then that's a half an hour times X amount of people that are lost productivity. And Fred just said it, it's a significant issue. It's been a significant issue since IT has been around. When stuff breaks, people stop working and they get distracted because now they have to go fix that thing. It's all real dollars that are being lost. So the low tech side of it is people aren't working when stuff is broken. We need to get visibility early. We need to get fixes that are automated and get the people out of the fix as well. But when you're talking low tech, it's literally people on phones saying something is broken and other people on the other end of those phones talking to other people trying to fix it. It's very low tech in most environments today.
Hey, Eddie, I want you to walk through these. I want to stage this for you though, real quick. And I want Mike to respond and Fred over the top, but like, I think a lot of times it's the person on the other end of the equation. If it's not urgent, like if they're not down, if they're not totally broken, I think they slow down the process. But before we do that, Mike saved us a while ago and I was too dumb to look. They had a footnote, and they actually defined it for the sake of this article, the way the author meant it. And I think Mike said it, but I'm just gonna repeat it. MTTR is a commonly used abbreviation in IT services and operations that stands for mean time to repair, mean time to response, mean time to respond, and mean time to resolution. I guess it depends on your frame of reference as to which one you mean by MTTR.
I think generally it's resolution is how long does it take to fix it? Now I guess there are elements where responding is for like a help desk. What is MTTR if there's a certain issue that pops up?
So truly, I think that's what it's meant. Mean time to restore, right? To resolve the issue. But all those steps in there, which is so neat about this article, because we do need to go through these, what it's calling out here, the percentages of why. That's what this is trying to say is, where are they today, still today in this journey, and what are the biggest problems you're still trying to solve? So I'll stop there, but I think these percentages are really neat to go over.
Mike, why don't you walk us through the graph as well as the numbers down below? And when you find the one that applies to, say, me, when it's not urgent, AKA Andy, because I don't respond for 3 days when somebody sends me something, highlight where that one fit, but go ahead.
So, I mean, per this chart with the 5 orange percentages, detection, identification, and logging, identifying what the issue is. And what this one concept this article does not talk about is deflection. If a person could, go to your website, say, I want to report an issue, and they're able to resolve themselves, that's deflection, and it's not going to be MTTR. MTTR is once the ticket is opened. But this first item of detection, identification, logging does touch a little bit, and I think it's mentioned elsewhere in the article about proactive customer support, identifying issues before the customer notices it's an issue. If you can find out that a system is offline, automatically create it, resolve it, the customer may not even know it, or they may be able to see that they're reporting it and we fix it 5 minutes later. So identifying it, submitting it. Categorization, triage, prioritization, and routing talks about like, hey, once you have created the ticket, you want to classify it so it gets to the correct group to work on it. You triage it to understand what's going on. You prioritize it, say, hey, yes, this is a high issue, but it's only impacting one person versus maybe something that is, just step down from high person, but it's impacting 10,000 people. There has to obviously be a relative prioritization. And then, per the categorization, the routing to the correct group.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, the first one, it has 12% here. You agree with
Yes.
that?
Yeah,
12%?
I think that's about right.
Yeah, that means 12% of the total time is spent in detection / identification and logging.
Yeah, I mean, from an end user, identifying the issue and then submitting it is part of their problem. Now, how long does it take to go to the right place to open a ticket? How do you find out where you can open the ticket? If you have a problem with your refrigerator, who are you going to call? That can absolutely be a part of time. But for us, hopefully they know where to go, and it would be smaller. I'd say on average 12 is reasonable.
And then it has logging as part of that too, and that's continuous throughout the entire cycle, I would think. The entire time, the logging piece.
Yep.
Is it logging the initial issue, or is that?
Yeah.
I would say logging the issue, opening the ticket.
Okay.
I have a couple comments on that. So one, the first thing coming in of somebody raising an incident, or incidents for now, right? Detection, identification, and logging. I mean, it could come from. It depends on the source it's coming from too. It could be somebody picking up the phone and saying I have an issue. It could be something coming from monitoring tools, and that has a login with it and logs that go along with that. So I mean, I would say that you would hope that it's a lot less than 12% for someone to raise an issue and tell someone what's going on to create that ticket or case for them. I think sometimes it becomes a lot more complex and takes time because of all the information needs to be captured to create that problem, right? The detection. So auto detection is one thing, and then I think coming off of that to identify what the real problem is probably why it goes up to 12. Because if it's auto detected, it should be quick. If it's something that somebody has to identify what the problem is, it's going to take a lot longer to create that case. Would be my only thoughts on that.
So so we got the next category, which Mike, you've already covered: categorization, triage, prioritization, and routing. You put that at 25%.
That's what they put at 25%. I would hope that would be quicker. I'm surprised that I mean, triage is part of it. Yes, you open the ticket, maybe it gets auto categorized, you prioritize, you route it, but the triage could take a fair amount of time. Say, hey, what exactly is going on? Somebody's reporting an issue with their VPN. Well, why? Is it something individually to them? Is it a server down? Is it related to a scheduled change? That's the part that I would say increases it.
Yeah, and especially if they don't have a tool like ServiceNow is using ITOM service mapping, you can see the impact upstream, downstream of a server going down. You might not know, you and I might be able to identify and triage an issue quickly, but if they don't have these tools in place, that triage, so the 25% could be very valid in a not, up to speed environment.
Well, I would tell you from 10 plus years of like service desk and running managed services, I mean, that triage is that piece, right? Categorization, prioritization, and routing should be automatic if you're using something like ServiceNow. To your point, Eddie, for anybody out there that's not using ServiceNow, it definitely changes it, right? Because who knows how they're handling the routing, how they're prioritizing. But with tools like ServiceNow, you can auto set those values. But triage, to Mike's point, that's another pain point, right? You got to be able to triage and understand what the real problem is and define that. Because if you can't define it, you can't get it to the right people, which means you can't route it. You can't put it in the right prioritization because you don't know the effect or the business services that you're impacting. So 25% to me, Andy, is very reasonable. I think probably 23% of that is on the triage place.
Yeah. Well, like, yeah, 80% of the 25 is or more is the triage.
Yep.
We're just making up numbers now.
Just like the same
No.
thing said before, identification and then triage, and now we're up to the third thing. So yeah.
50% of the time, it works every time.
Oh, you guys are doing fuzzy math.
So the third one with that 30%, the team engagement, incident communication, collaboration, that goes back to what I was talking about before. People on phones talking to other people on phones, shooting emails to each other. It's a lot of chasing your tail during that piece. And you can see that this is, as far as this graph is concerned, the largest time chunk is getting people together to figure out how to go forward with the fix.
Yeah. Like for me, I'm envisioning if I had to call Fred or Eddie to talk about this, communication would be 90% of the 30%. But if I had to call Mike, it'd be like 10% of the 30%.
The thing is, though, it does show that out of all the time you put into trying to resolve something to get something to close, they're saying the bulk of that, 30% or the leading cause of that is team engagement, incident communication, and collaboration, right? So what tools are around that to help someone be more efficient in that? And that's a big part of this.
So since we were letting Mike walk us through this and Mike didn't get a chance to comment on this one comment, Mike, what is your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I would say that's it's bad that it's so high for sure. And there are, if you have many customers reporting the same issue, and you have major incident management or major issue management, there are ways to facilitate the communication and collaboration. But yes, to Eddie's point, the amount of time it takes us to reach out to the correct people and pull the right people together can be high.
Is it fair to say this section here, the one we've been talking about, engagement, incident communication, and collaboration, that's where AI has the most promise?
And the one before.
I would say the second one is probably the first place that there's opportunity. And some of that is not what we think of as generative AI, is just predictive intelligence. So the second one is more predictive intelligence. How do you auto-categorize it based on keywords, who it's coming from, the number of people that it's impacting, and the like. Team engagement, I'd see an opportunity for that to get it to the correct people, and then notify the people and automatically schedule meetings. But there's also opportunity in the last one as well. Once you have written it up and you need to I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but to write it up and to summarize the issue and communicate that out, that's also an opportunity for AI.
Yeah, I don't know if the AI capabilities are there yet to be able to scan the challenges in your CMDB or your back office to identify what the problem is and then propose solutions. I don't know if it's quite there yet.
I will say that AI does come in for the first one, detection. There are logs out there that will say, hey, this thing is trending up, but it hasn't hit your threshold. Do you want to wait till it hits the threshold for you to realize there was a problem? Or do you want to have AI saying, oh, this is trending up, but isn't there, but there's another one that's just below, but it's completely stable? There's a great opportunity for AI there.
Yep.
Right. Yes. Because that functionality exists today in ServiceNow, but there's only an alert that is sent out if there's an upgrade due or something. It won't actually propose that solution.
Unless it learns of those solution types, right? So again, in general, I think it's there. Like Mike said, predictive intelligence has been there. People have used that before to help to do some of that from an automation standpoint. But true AI and Gen AI, I think we'll start seeing more use cases around that and how you use it with some of this communication type stuff, right? Summaries of issues. How do you kind of go through to where the resolution? How do you summarize that and get that out to close that case? I think a lot of that can be used for some generative AI in communication back to the person who put the case in.
So I kind of teed you. Oh, wait a minute, with the last one. Mike, the last section here says closure and post-incident reporting. It says 5%.
Yeah. I'd say, summarizing it in order to give an update to the customer, 5% is reasonable. We've all seen tickets that have languished for weeks at a customer or at a partner or customer because it just takes so long to resolve it. But assuming that it's a reasonably approached ticket, summarizing it and closing it is about 5% it seems reasonable. But again, AI is also an ability to speed this up as far as summarizing the issues, summarizing the communications into readable outputs for the end user.
Okay, the next section gets to my point earlier, and it talks about what percentage of MTTR is inactive time spent waiting for information or response. Mike, you want to talk through the numbers they provide here?
So this is quotes from people on thinking how much time is wasted. So 27% think that 50% or more time is wasted. 42% it says it's a quarter. 19% says it's 10, and 12% says it's almost no wasted time. I'm assuming that this question is asked of the IT departments who are working it, not the end user. The end user is not going to normally know that, but might be wondering how much time is being wasted. Why haven't I got response back? It's all perceptive. An end user, I might think that it's wasted. I recently opened some tickets and I'm like, hey, what's my status? Not with internal, but with ServiceNow itself, saying, hey, what's the status of my ticket? And I don't get an answer. And a lot of it's maybe that person hasn't prioritized my ticket across however many other tickets that are assigned to them. To me, that was a waste of time. But for the person working on it, maybe it's just an efficient use of what they were assigned and their availability.
Yeah.
So
I feel like it's implied that the question was posed to the folks working on the issue. And the takeaway, if you get out of the granularity of these numbers, 90% of the people questioned says there is significant wasted time in the resolution.
yes.
It's a big deal. I mean, it goes back to what Andy and I were saying at the beginning, that this is every hour, and the next segment is going to talk about what that MTTR is. If it's 30 minutes to 2 hours, if we average out an hour times X number of people, these are real dollars that these issues are burning through.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I think those percentages to me would seem accurate, but again, to Mike's point, is perception, right? So 50% of time is wasted. I feel like that probably everything open, because you always feel like half the time you're trying to re-explain something you've already said is an issue, or you're waiting for people to figure out how to go about fixing it. It's usually not how to fix it. It's usually identifying and triaging it. So you have to think that if half the battle is actually articulating what the problem is and triaging it, then certainly you can cut 50% of your wasted time out by trying to get to that quicker. That would be my take on it.
I haven't seen it with many customers, but the first company I worked for when I got into ServiceNow, which is 11 years ago, as an education company, the way they did their changes is they actually looked at how many impacted user minutes there were. Like, hey, this took an hour or this took 10 minutes, but multiplied by how many people were impacted. And based on that calculation, then they would determine, when a change could happen. Is it something that can happen during the day, or has to happen on the weekend because of just how many impacted minutes there were of an issue as a result of a planned or unplanned change. So it's interesting, but by itself, without knowing how many people it's impacting, I don't know. I mean, is it 50% time wasted, but it's a low priority issue? That's quite different from some super high critical issue impacting thousands of people or systems offline. And I don't know that the statistics fully represent that.
Yeah, I think these, I mean, again, just looking at the numbers, I think these are rounded up and these are generalities.
For sure.
Yes. I mean, I know personally that in my life, when I try to explain like what's wrong with my marriage, 50% of that time is wasted. That's just time that I'm never going to get back.
Is that your 50% or something?
Yeah. My 50% is all wasted time trying to explain that problem.
I'm not touching that one. Okay, next topic.
I don't know why my mouth moved, but go ahead, Andy.
So it says, what's the problem? And then parentheses problems. What are the biggest challenges to effective incident response and management? Select 2. Mike, again, I'll let you lead us on this, but what are people saying the problems are?
Right. So since you can respond to 2, these numbers should add up to 200%. So looking at the first one, it says 51% of people say that getting the right teams engaged and collaborating is critical, and I would agree. I've opened tickets where I'm like, hey, I don't know if it's I opened it against the correct team, and so sometimes I open 2 tickets because I'm like, well, probably one of these will get it quicker because I need a quick answer. Being able to get it to the correct team is absolutely high critical importance, because you can't start until it's to the right team. Second, lack of a unified view and dependency mapping of service elements. That's 39%. And this goes back to one of the things that Eddie mentioned. A person calling up doesn't know that there's a load balancer or a web server or the like down. They just know that their service is having an issue. Their VPN service is having an issue. Their email is having an issue. Their connectivity to some system is having an issue. And to be able to lock or associate that service to the dependent items and then identify which issues or which CIs might have changed recently that could be causing this is high, and I would probably say this is in reality probably one of the highest, but it is ranked second.
So Mike, I was going to pause you for a second. Is those number 2? I'm glad you just said it because that's the first thing that popped in my mind. I'm surprised by that because the reality is what Mike said. It is that number 2, the unified view, understanding what's been affected, service map, and understand what's being impacted. That's the number 1 thing. That's going to delay your time because in order to find that out, sometimes you have to get teams together. Which teams do you get together? Like it kind of goes hand in hand, but really not understanding what's being impacted is what takes the most wasted time perception. Because once you find out the person, let's just say it ends up being a networking issue, a bad port in somebody's office, but they think it's 100 things else. By the time you get to identifying that person could probably fix it very quickly. But you spend a lot of time identifying what's been impacted. So I would, like Mike, you said it. I was going to say it if you didn't. Like that number 2 instead of 39 should probably be like 80, and the rest can fall behind that, in my opinion. But
right. So the third one is understanding the impact. And when I open tickets, whether it's internally or with ServiceNow or about my refrigerator, I always start saying, I don't just say, hey, this is the issue. I'm saying, hey, this is my impact. I'm trying to do this. I can't. And then I go into the details of what I'm seeing so that people can understand what I'm dealing with. The reason why this is important. I think that as a receiver of tickets, not knowing that context where you have to go back into the customer and say, okay, I'm seeing what you're seeing, but why is this important? That could be fairly large. Going into the fourth one, inefficient manual processes and bottlenecks. For sure, I mean, automating these tools, whether it's orchestration to fix the issue or having knowledge articles to describe the issue. People have had this problem before. Why am I not able to find a quick Google answer or see this in my knowledge base? That could be considerable.
Mike, and that one's actually really important as well because, not to work in a commercial in the middle of this podcast, but every conversation we have with our customer begins with process. We are not going to build a platform out to something that's antiquated and broken. So inefficient manual processes, we can practically automate any process. I mean, it's a blanket statement. There's some things we can't, but 98% of the time, we're going to be able to automate that and remove those bottlenecks. So that is something where we start the conversation, which by this takes care of 31% of those challenges right there by automating these processes.
Yeah. The second to last is too many alerts. As if you had like an alerting system, RMM system that's reporting on issues, and it's just spamming you with tickets, it's hard to know what's most important. So there is a certain amount of noise that one has to deal with. I could see why that's important, and hopefully, once you start seeing that, you start having some filters on items to indicate whether it's automated, whether people are actually, real people are reporting it, whether it's just, flipping over and over and over. That's 19%. And then the last one of the biggest challenges is siloed systems and tools. And of course, that's a fantastic ability of ServiceNow, that it brings everything into a single pane of glass, that instead of having one system for this and one system for that and one system for the third thing, you can see everything together. You can see your incident. You can see how it's tied to your CMDB. You can see how it's tied to your users, whether it's associated with projects or the like, or everything being able to come together in ServiceNow is able to reduce that percentage for sure for any ServiceNow ticket.
And you know, one thing I love about our team, Andy, here in our ServiceNow practice as XenTegra, is you look at all of those, what are 6 items, right? I could take each one of those and kind of identify, you know, within the applications of ServiceNow, within the platform, how it can help you solve these things. Even when it comes to too many alerts, right? There's so much things we've done in the past to help with that, you know, between stacking, the business services aspect of it, right? You know, being able to be able to take one incident that's a real issue and then fold up 45 other things underneath it because you know that that's not the real cause. I mean, there's so many things that we can look at that ServiceNow can solve for. I know that's going to be the next part, but that's one thing I love about our team is that we have so much experience of years of not only implementing ServiceNow in technology workflows, but also being in the industry, like Mike said, seeing that in the companies we work for and doing it real time.
Yeah.
You know, Fred's a great point. I mean, you and I are working on this deal right now. What's actually closing? It's a global satellite company, and we've been scoping this work. They're doing a source to pay from opportunity creation to implementation. 90% of the last 3 months has been talking about their processes. It's streamlining those, removing those bottlenecks before we ever talk about the platform. So that is separate from this MTTR conversation, but it's a thread that runs through everything that we do.
Exactly.
You know, for me, it's most exciting 2 things. One, Fred made a comment, we've never lost a customer. That on the ServiceNow side, that's close. It may be 100% true, but it's really, really close. But what I love about this space, and it's just the reality of it, is if you go in and you solve number 3 here, business context, understanding the impact, and that number goes down, all the other numbers go up because it's still just a percentage of the overall problem, and the problem gets better and better and better, but it never goes away. It just moves from one answer to the other, and you're just whittling them all down the best you can. But you know, it's still, it'll
Well,
never.
eventually they'll stop asking the questions. That's the goal.
Well, truthfully, guys, I lived in a state for many, many years where I had that type of status there, like those type of measurements, and over here, the measurements on our mean time resolution numbers, right? So how do you drive those numbers down, or how do you put it within the SLA time, as Mike mentioned, right? You set your SLAs and you have to measure against that. And as you attack these things, so maybe it is that people getting the teams better together, and you implement some things within ServiceNow to help with that skills-based routing. Who's the right people? How do you get it to them, right? How do you notify them? How do you make sure they're responding? And all those, I mean, all those things are really necessary. And you will see those numbers going down here. And then why? Because those numbers drop over here and you tackle the next thing. It's a never ending battle. Once you fix a couple of things, something else is going to pop up.
Well, it's
Right.
like whack-a-mole,
Yeah.
but the moles are getting smaller and less impactful, but yet there's always gonna be moles to whack.
Well, you get to a point where your MTTR is within your SLA range and you don't have to discuss it anymore. But
Right.
I'm telling you, it's not that difficult to attack your MTTR for most companies. If you have a solution like ServiceNow. Now, outside of that, I can't really speak to it, right? But I had to
No.
implement ServiceNow to get there.
Have visibility in the tools, you're right.
Yep.
If you don't, you ain't never gonna solve it.
That's correct.
Well,
I-
it's like my drinking problem. My first step was acknowledging that I had a problem, and then it's easy to fix.
Yep.
Man, here we go down that one.
Yeah,
I-
dude. Yeah, I
Here we
didn't
get to the
get
whole
much
wife
sleep last
discussion
night.
again, so
I'm
we
all
can't
over
get-
the place today.
I think I know what the wife conversation was.
Exactly.
We're already into that one.
Can we do another podcast on Eddie?
Mike, I'm sorry, you had a comment. Go ahead.
I am gonna add one piece, and now Eddie's distracted me. I wanted to say, oh, right. So even if your MTTR is going down or is good, that doesn't mean that there might be certain groups where it's going higher. And that could be a manual effort. Hey, let me go look at all of my teams and maybe do MTTR by each one. But ServiceNow, going back to that AI capability, there are AI capabilities that will help you identify those teams so you don't have to wade through the data.
Good point.
All right, last section here. We're running low on time, and I'm sure our listeners are either enthusiastic or gone to sleep, one or the other. It talks about finding a realistic solution, and I like that they call it a realistic solution, not just a solution, because as we were just pointing out, it's not solvable. It's just we can make it better. Mike, go ahead.
Well, this is interesting. It talks about, of course, doing information sharing, collaboration, cross-functional workflows to address these challenges. But they go into the fact that most IT leaders expect that outage frequency and duration would continue to rise because of how much stuff is going on. But then an intriguing 18% of the panel ran counter trends saying that incidents and outages have decreased due to proactive systems that have been put in place. If we're talking about what I mentioned at the beginning, the deflection of tickets, you might see that overall the number of tickets are going down because you have those deflections, but that might mean that the length of your tickets might be going higher because the remaining tickets are maybe more complex. Multiple issues coming on the plate here. Going to the third paragraph, ServiceNow absolutely offers many robust weapons in the battle, from predictive intelligence to more advanced AI to the ability to do, major incident management communication, the ability to have that unified platform in order to get rid of some of those silos. You can't go into all of the ServiceNow capabilities in just a brief blog to remediate these issues, but ServiceNow platform is absolutely trying to address MTTR and all the topics that we've discussed during this blog today.
Yeah, and at its core, and Mike just touched on it, it's the unified platform, I think, is where we start. You can collaborate. If your operations team, your help desk, your end users, your leaders are all on the same platform, working in the same pane of glass, life just gets simpler. Especially when you get visibility into your organization, all your CMDB, all of your service mapping is all in one place. Then these decisions and these resolution times will naturally go down. It starts with a simple solution, which is a unified platform, and then we can scale into those other areas where those percentages were high.
And I want to say this too. I think finding a realistic solution has to come with also a realistic investment from the people trying to solve the problem. I think that when you have a platform like ServiceNow and you're trying to really solve for problems, I think that's the biggest thing that I see is a lack of investment and time to make those things get corrected. If you're having a lot of issues with team collaborations or triage and those types of things, you really have to spend the time. Like Eddie said, it was important for us to spend 3 months with a customer to understand what their real process issues are, what's the bottlenecks. Because if we don't find that out or fix that, and putting a tool in of any type, it's not even going to solve any of that stuff, right? So I think it's a matter of somebody has to have a realistic solution by realistically looking at the problem at hand and understanding how we need to solve that. And I,
Yeah, Fred,
but I would say ServiceNow's toolbox, right? I'm sold. I quit my other job to come here and just concentrate on ServiceNow for that reason. It is a Swiss Army knife. It can solve all these things we mentioned, right?
Yeah, Fred, I think it's a spot on point. I think it's really important to understand that this is not a Band-Aid approach. This is a strategic solution to an overarching problem. And it's not going to happen in a day. It's organizational change, it's changing hearts and minds, it's changing platforms. This is a big deal to a long-term solution.
The long-term solution with digital transformation, culture change, and everything. I mean, it starts somewhere, right? And you find your biggest problems and you try to prove that and solve it. Again, MTTR is a major problem for everybody, in my opinion. You either have it solved or you don't. All right, that's my final comments, Andy.
Well, maybe. You mentioned earlier, SLAs, and I just wonder from y'all's experience, do you find people coming to us with defined SLAs, or is that
typically, yeah, they'll have something. It's usually generic. The problem comes in when they have the SLA is the same for an incident or request. Those two things, there's oil and water. They're not the same, but yeah, they generally have something defined.
I think what's important about SLAs, I'm going to say this because I think it's a matter of me dealing with this for so long. Mike's mentioned deflection a couple of times. I think that's very interesting, right? Because I feel like that a couple of the providers for me, let's just say cable provider, for instance, right? Their tactic is deflection, and it makes you want to give up on stuff, right? So that's man, I was kind of losing a little bit of what I was going to say.
There could be good and bad deflection. If you can get the person to self-resolve through like a ServiceNow portal, fantastic. But yeah, if you just want to kick the can down the road, as Fred is relaying, that's a problem.
That is a problem.
Yeah, or those voice prompt loops you get in and you can't get out of. That's a great way to deflect a ticket from ever being created.
That's exactly right.
Hey, let's see, the one last thing I was gonna say, we get a lot of pushback on ServiceNow being expensive. If we apply what we've talked about here and we're solving problems faster and we're bringing, maybe replacing other tools in the process, and we have one unified platform to do this with, Eddie, is it expensive?
Absolutely not. And that is such, I look, I love that question. I love that comment. ServiceNow is not expensive. People are expensive. Technology is cheap across the board, whether it's a laptop or a platform. Technology is cheap. It's our job to show you where the value is. If you feel that ServiceNow is expensive, whoever you've spoken to in the past has not done a good job of showing you where you're going to ultimately save that money, increase productivity, increase visibility, ticket deflection, MTTR, all of this value. Without a doubt, it's service. It might not look cheap on paper, but when you look at the value of what you're buying, 100% is cheap. I'm very passionate about that because that is something that's come up over the years. It's too expensive. No, it's because the people, the consultants have gotten lazy explaining where the value of the platform is.
I mean, to Eddie's point, if you could spend $50,000 to create some automation or to help a automated process to help solve MTTR, and you put that up against the number of hours spent by the people, like Eddie's point, people are expensive, I guarantee it would justify itself tenfold.
Yeah.
Because once you put a solution in place that can solve for that, that's a lifetime of that process.
Yeah, there's a reason why 88% of Fortune 500 companies are ServiceNow users. You don't think they do their due diligence, and they spend 7-8 digits on the platform licenses. So it's 100% the value's there.
Yep.
I knew I could get Fred to go again.
I
Mike, your and only your final thoughts.
I think that MTTR is a fantastic metric. There are other KPIs that come into place. If you're doing an implementation, yes, MTTR might be one of the things you're trying to address, but there might be other KPIs that you want to look at. And if we come in and do an implementation for you as a customer, we will be discussing those as well.
I like the MTTR conversation just because it's gonna impact user perception, and user perception is just massively important. Gentlemen, thank you, and we'll do it again in 2 weeks.
Dude, I had like 4 more jokes queued up, just so you know.
Tune in for our podcast. We're starting on Eddie's life every other week.
We'll put that in the outtakes or next week.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
Sean.
you.